All right. So I've decided to record an aid that will guide you in your study of the um, skeletal system of our model animal. So here you can see a 3D visualization of our model animal, and we will look into um, the bone groups, specific bones per bone group um, of the model amphibian for your review. So I understand that or now that we are at the end juncture of our course on zoology laboratory, we'll focus our energies, our discussions on the organ systems. Okay, so I hope that this guide will be helpful to you as you study your respective or as you study your individual skeletal system sets. Okay, so we'll look into the axial skeleton first, and then eventually we'll move into the bones that comprise the appendicular skeleton. Okay, so you can see our model animal, our 3D model animal with the skin intact, no? And in the past, during our past or our previous meeting, I instructed you all to de-skinned or skin your specimens since we're already studying the muscular system and the internal organs. No? Okay, so let's hypothetically let's or I mean in this demonstration we will remove the skin and we'll look into the skeleton. Okay, so here you can see a generalized structure, generalized schematic of the amphibian or the frog skeleton. So, okay, so let's remind ourselves of the orientations or the views. So you have your dorsal view of your animal, and when you flipped it, when you if you flip it on its underbelly, of course, so you have your ventral view. Okay, so let's first examine the axial skeleton at the dorsal view. Okay, okay. So let's first take a look at the skull. So the skull is what you can see as the head portion that protects the eyes, the brain, and essentially houses associated sense organs. Aside from the eyes, of course, you can expect the presence of the auditory senses or the auditory system of the animal. Okay, so first we'll look into the neurocranium. The neurocranium, which is a T-shaped structure. Okay, so here you can see the neurocranium actually comprises the area surrounded by the pair of prootic bones, this one and this one, the ex-occipitals. Okay, so this area here. Okay, so this area here, um, this area here comprises the skull or comprises the bone group that encases the brain of our model animal. So pair of prootic bones, the ex-occipitals, okay. So inside here, inside the neurocranium, the brain is expected to be found. So here you can see that if you look into this side, you expect to see that the ex-occipitals actually has an opening here, the foramen magnum, which connects the spinal cord of the animal with its brain. Okay. Now, moving on to the dermal investing bones that extend to the nasal area of the animal. So the dermal investing bones of anorants are consisting of paired nasal bone here, the paired frontoparietals, right? Okay, and we on the other side, or on the area that comprises our near the neurocranium, we have the pair of paraspinoids here. Okay, and then moving on to the jaw area, okay, that essentially serves as a joint, or serves as a connection between the upper and the lower jaw of the animal. Of course, we also have the squamosals. So this one, squamosal, which is hammer shaped in appearance. Okay, so here you can see. Let's take a look at this view. All right, so that's a squamosal here. And then, of course, we have the pterygoid, which is a triradiate bone element, almost looking like an inverted Y-shaped structure, right? So those are the dermal investing bones. So again, as a review, so we have our nasal bones, right? The frontoparietals, okay? Our paraspinoids, you can see here, our squamosals, and our pterygoid. Okay? So those are our dermal investing bones. Now, let's look into the upper and lower jaw. Okay. Actually, before we look into that, let's examine the appearance or the orientation of the bones at the ventral view. So, at the ventral view of the animal, okay, so what are we seeing? We're seeing the paired paraspinoids, our protic bones here, our frontoparietals, our nasals. Okay, they're also appearing on the ventral side. And then we have our squamosal bone, the pterygoid here. Okay, so those are what you can see at the ventral side. Now, looking into the upper and the lower jaw. So the upper jaw is comprised of the structures I am highlighting as of speaking. So these ones. And then the lower jaw. Okay, so let's take a look at them. So first is our upper jaw. Let's take a look at the dorsal position. So we have our premaxilla bones. Okay, here on the tip of the upper jaw. Our maxilla, which is what do you call this? Which is a bone, a pair of bones that extend or essentially comprise the big portion of the upper jaw. So that's a maxilla, highlighting here. So premaxilla and then the maxilla. Okay, so same on the other side. That's the maxilla and the pre-maxilla. Okay, and then we also have our here. Okay, the quadratojugal, which completes the upper jaw at the posterior end of, or the posterior orientation. So the quadratojugal, the quadratojugal, our, oops, one moment. Here, quadratojugal, and then the maxilla, and the premaxilla. Okay? Now, if we look into the lower jaw, okay, so what do we have in the lower jaw? So we have the following bones. We have the dentary, okay, the angulus splenial. So the dentary, it is um, It invests on the Meckel's cartilage anterior-laterally, and then the angulosplenial. Okay, it's the most posterior bone of the lower jaw, and ventral to the dentary. So if you look into, you position it this way. So what we are seeing. Okay, let's zoom a bit. Okay, so the lower jaw. Right, so we have the dentary, okay, the angulosplenial, and then of course on the tip of the lower jaw is the mentomycalian, okay. So yeah, so those are the bones that we can see on the skull area and the lower and the upper jaw. Okay. What we are not seeing here, or not represented in this visual, is the hyoid apparatus, which lies on the it lies on the floor of the mouth, no. So in our next meeting, I'll help you identify the structures of the hyoid apparatus with your own using your skeletal systems. Okay. Now, still in the axial skeleton, let's take a look at the structure of the vertebral column. So the backbone of the frog consists of 10 vertebrae. Okay, there's one atlas, which is the first vertebrae or the first vertebra. Then there is seven typical vertebra or seven typical vertebrae. So the second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and the eighth. So these are all typical because they have essentially the same structure, same appearance. There is one sacral vertebra, which is the ninth vertebra, and there is one urostyle. Okay? So those are the structure or the bones comprising the vertebral column. So the atlas, also known as the cervical vertebra, it's the most anterior one and connects with the neurocranium or is proximal to the neurocranium. Then the typical vertebra, second to the eight vertebrae. Each of them bears a pair of pre and post zygapophyses on the on the neural arch. It cannot really be shown here, but I believe I have provided you with an atlas where you can look into the specific structures of a typical vertebra. Then the sacrum, okay, it's a specialized vertebra, the ninth one, and then the urostyle, no? Which is the 10th and the 10th and terminal vertebra. Okay. One moment. Okay. And what you can see here, the urostyle, it's slender, and it articulates anteriorly with the sacral vertebra. If you look into the structure or the orientation of the vertebral column bones at the ventral position, so what do we have? Same thing. Okay, so the atlas, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, typical vertebrae, the sacral, and the urostyle. Okay. All right. Now, let's examine the trunk and the hips. No, let's examine the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. Okay. So here you can see at the dorsal view, the pectoral girdle comprises of the structures, the bone groups that connect the four limbs to the axial skeleton or to the axis of the animal. Okay, and here we can see dorsally the major structure or the most obvious one is the suprascapula. Okay, it's flat whitish cartilage attached dorsally to the scapulae. Okay, so the suprascapula, and then the scapulae, right? And then if you look ventrally, so what structures do we expect to find at the comprising the pectoral girdle? So again, we have the suprascapula and the scapula, and we have the clavicle bone, which is slender. It's transverse, transverse orientation. Okay, and then we have the coracoid. Then we have the sternum area of the animal. So here you can see the specific divisions of the sternum of the animal. Okay. It's not really. I mean, this is a generic representation of uh, our frog model animals. So you don't expect to see all the structures, no? All the bone structures, as we have identified in our laboratory manual. Again, as a review, so we have the pectoral girdle connecting the forelimbs to the actual skeleton. So we have the suprascapula dorsally, the scapula, the clavicle, the coracoid, and the sternum area. Take a look at it on a side view, yan. So you can see coracoid, clavicle, scapula, suprascapula, then the sternum area. Right. What's not shown here, okay, is the connection between the humerus bone, the arm bone, okay, with the pectoral girdle. So here you can expect a depression, all right, that a depression where the humerus articulates with the pectoral girdle. So that depression is what we call the glenoid fossa. It's not really shown here. It's not animated or included in this animation. Okay. Now, before we examine the forelimbs and the hind limbs, let's take a look at the pelvic girdle. So here is the pelvic girdle. So this area here, right, is the pelvic girdle. Okay. So the pelvic girdle, it supports the limbs, the hind limbs, the posterior limbs. And similar with the pectoral girdle, it consists of a left and a right side. Okay. So what are the bones that comprise the pelvic girdle? The longest one you can see is the ilium, dorsal view. It's the most dorsal anterior long bone of the pelvic girdle. Then you have your here the pubis. Okay, it's more ventral. So here you can see. So the pubis, it's small, triangular bone, immediately posterior but ventral to the ilium. Okay. The two pubic bones fuse, forming the pubic symphysis. Okay, then you have the ischium, which is a large bone, the posterior end of the pelvic girdle. And then what is not shown here, okay, let's wait. What's not shown here is again another depression where the forelimbs, or where the limb bones articulate against the pelvic girdle. So here, we are identifying the long femur, so that the articulation between the femur and the pelvic girdle here, it's not shown, is actually the acetabular cup, or the acetabulum. Okay. If you examine ventrally, so same thing. So you are seeing the ilium, the ischium here, the pubis, right? And then the connection between the femur and the pelvic girdle, the depression expected to be found on this juncture, is the acetabulum. Okay. Now, we will examine the bones of the appendicular system. So this is going to be quite quick because the bones are not that as specific, or not that as many, no, relative to our actual skeleton. So we have for the forelimbs, we have the humerus, okay, humerus, which is the most proximal bone of the forelimb. Then we have the radioulna, okay, which is a fused bone. So from by its name, you can say that, or we can identify that there are two bones fused comprising this bone structure, the radioulna. Then we have the carpals, the carpal bones here. Carpal bones, which are comprising the wrist portion of the model animal. And then we have the metacarpals, the carpal bones. And of course, our phalanges. So on the same side, on the other side, it's the same pair, same grouping of bones. Now looking into the hind limb, so what do we have? Of course, the longest bone of the animal, femur, the longest bone of our model animal, it's the femur, the hind limb bone. Then we have the tibiofibula, which is also a fused bone, right? And then we have our we have a pair of bones right after the tibiofibula, which is the astragalus and the calcaneum. Okay, then we have our metatarsal bones and our phalanges. Our phalanges here on the toes of the hind limb. Okay. I think that's all. Okay, so I hope that this guide will help you. You can go back to this recorded session to review the frog skeletal system. Okay.